Welcome to Senior Beat. My name is Christine Beatty. I'm the director at the Madison Senior Center, and my co-producer is Tom Frazier. I like to say he's the man of many hats. He's not wearing one today, although he should be.
I'm outside, I am.
Yes, I bet. Well, good to have you here, Tom, and we have a very wonderful guest to speak for the entire program. So.
Yeah, we do. I think we're very fortunate to have Dennis Dresang, who is Professor Emeritus of Political Science and Public Affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's the founding director of the Robert M. La Follette School of Public Affairs at UW-Madison and has served as chair of the Department of Political Science at UW-Madison. He's written some books, including co-author of Politics and Policy in American States and Communities and author of Personnel Management in Government Agencies and Nonprofit Organizations.
That's one I should read.
We should have read that a long time ago.
My goodness.
He has his PhD from the University of California, Los Angeles, and he's served on numerous governmental task forces, I think mostly for the state of Wisconsin. So welcome, Dennis.
Thank you.
Glad you're here.
Well,
we need you here to help us.
Really.
And we have just had a presidential election not too long ago, a couple of months ago, I guess, and Dennis in his role of political science and was even teaching a class, a Plato class at the Senior Center on,
we get to see him,
with the topic being the election.
Wow.
Election. So I think we have the expert here to talk about it. So maybe Dennis, I think it came as a surprise to a lot of us, what happened, the results, Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton and sort of led a kind of a landslide in many other ways. What do you think happened? Tell us your point of view.
Well, like other experts, I was totally floored. Did not expect, I didn't expect that Trump would be the candidate of the Republican Party, much less the president-elect of the United States. The signs for him becoming the nominee started to emerge as there was this cast of thousands who were nominees, and just mathematically it worked out that the votes got split in the primary and he was able to find a way to get the nomination, and that was not anticipated. And it was not anticipated in large part because of his character, his lack of government experience. He didn't seem to be knowledgeable about public policy. He didn't even seem to care about public policy. So it didn't seem like, boy, if you were going to pick a candidate, that this would be a good one. But obviously we were wrong. He got the nomination, and the same caveats and concerns emerged as he became the candidate for the Republican Party. But again, that went aside. And the polls seemed to indicate that indeed it was unlikely he would become the president-elect of the United States. We had two candidates who were historically unpopular. People did not like either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. If you were going to take a look at the polls, Donald Trump was more disliked than Hillary Clinton. So it looked like, well, okay, neither candidate is really loved, but it looks like Donald Trump is least loved, and so Hillary Clinton had the edge. Polls seemed to indicate as well that Hillary Clinton was going to win, and those polls were showing that her victory right up until the end. They were wrong, obviously, and it was not a squeaker. It doesn't really match the political science formal definition of a landslide, but it was not a squeaker. Donald Trump became president-elect and will be inaugurated January 20th.
Wow.
One of the big surprises to me was how quickly things changed, because there was a time like 2 weeks before the election where Hillary Clinton was going to Texas and Arizona, and sort of planning on her landslide.
That's right. It looked like there were a lot of red states, historically red states, Arizona and Georgia, the two primary examples where polls were indicating that she had a chance of winning there. And part of the strategy as well was if she could spend some time in those states, then Donald Trump would get more nervous and he'd have to spread his resources, which were not as much as Hillary Clinton's resources. That was another indicator. Usually the candidate with the most money is the one who is going to get the most votes. Now, to sort of put things in perspective, she did get the most votes. She won the popular vote by almost 3 million votes. And that is absolutely incredible. It's very unusual for the candidate who does not get the Electoral College to that there's a discrepancy between Electoral College and popular vote, but the gap this time around was just really stunning. And again, to put things in perspective, it was not really a devastating blow for the Democratic Party. Democratic Party picked up seats in the United States Senate. It picked up seats in the House of Representatives. Not enough to become the majority party, but it was an indication that the polls were wrong. They weren't totally wrong. There is always this margin of error. And the polls were most in error on the state levels. That's where the state of Wisconsin, for example, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and a number of other states, even Florida, North Carolina. I mean, there were a number of states where the polls were wrong more on the state level than in the national level. National level predicted Hillary Clinton would get more votes than Donald Trump, and indeed that happened. But at the state level is where we have models that have to be tweaked. And I think if we're to understand why were the polls wrong, it's really in that. And just a real brief explanation. When you do a poll, you want to have a random sample. So you try and contact people, use telephone. Then you take a look at what comes in and you say, well, does this sample match the demographic character of our particular state? Almost inevitably, it will not. There are all sorts of problems. People don't answer their phone. You've got cell phones that have got area codes of where people used to live, all sorts of things like that. And so what you do is you tweak your model and you try and take a look at a part of the model, say women within a particular age range that are underrepresented, and you just mathematically multiply the answers of those people who did respond times a number that would get them up to where they would reflect the total population. And those models continually have to be tweaked. And when they're wrong, the polls are wrong. And I think we've got a lot of people who did polling at the state level who have to get back to the drawing boards and say, wow, we need to do some tweaking.
Yeah.
Probably out there tweaking right now.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Trying to figure this out, because that was another thing that surprised me was, you know, I thought Clinton is sort of the old pro, you know, at holding public office, winning elections and so forth, would have a electoral college strategy, you know, that she would be the one to figure that all out.
Yeah.
And it just, again, worked the opposite. She got the most popular votes and he got the electoral college by, you know, a good margin.
Sure, and in that regard, Wisconsin is a good case in point. She was ahead by 6 points, basically. Right. Well, that's beyond the margin of error in most statistical modeling. So she's ahead in Wisconsin by 6 points. Her calculation was, why should I spend time in Wisconsin? I've won, or I will win. So I'll go to Georgia, and I'll go to Arizona. And it turns out that that was a miscalculation. Whether or not she would have won if she visited Wisconsin, we can only speculate. But again, to put things into perspective, if you take the votes the rather small margin of votes. In Wisconsin, it was 22,000 that Trump beat Clinton by. Similar kinds of margins in Michigan and Pennsylvania. You take those margins, you add them up, and that total is a little bit less than the number of people who can be in Lambeau Field. If you took Lambeau Field and emptied it out and put it in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan in the right proportions, Hillary Clinton would be president of the United States.
Wow. Thanks. That's an interesting picture that you've given us for that. Yeah.
Lambeau Field. We
Wow.
have to get that. Get that in here.
Yeah, let's
Right.
figure that one out. Oh,
Yeah,
my.
yeah.
Do you think Donald Trump was surprised?
He says he was surprised, and I think he probably was
was,
surprised.
yeah.
I think his campaign staff was surprised as well. They said that they had indications. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't. They haven't indicated what those specifics are, but I think yes, that he was surprised.
I think maybe there'll be a book or two about this election, don't you think?
Well, I think so too. Not only books, but dissertations. It's good to be retired.
You don't have to read them.
I don't have to read them.
Oh,
I can wait for the movie.
yeah.
So he's been president-elect long enough now that we're seeing appointments at a cabinet level position. I guess I have some thoughts about some of that. What are your thoughts about?
Well, one thought that comes to mind is that he seems to be doing something that George W. Bush did as well, and that is treating a victory in the Electoral College as if it's a mandate from the people. And he's really not doing anything in those cabinet appointments or in his policy proposals to the stage. Everything's pretty vague and not specified. But there's very little effort to really unite the country and reach out to actually the many people, the majority of people who did not vote for him. Instead, his cabinet appointments, his statements, his posturing right now is very extreme, very much right-wing, and treating it, his Electoral College victory as if it were a mandate from the people of the United States.
Yeah. And there is a period of time where typically candidates do make certain efforts to bring the country together. What our hallmark of our democracy is the peaceful transfer of power. And part of that is bringing the country together again. And we haven't heard those kinds of comments yet.
No, we certainly haven't. And it's interesting because it's an ideological posturing that's going on even more than partisan.
Yeah.
I mean, lots of times in terms of appointments, and we can go back to, President Obama, President Clinton, even President Bush to some extent, they will make very high-level appointments of people from the other party as a way of doing exactly what you
Exactly
said, of
that.
saying, look, I'm president of all the people.
And
I
I
want
want
us
to make
come.
this effort.
Exactly.
Dennis will be right back after this short little interlude, but we're anxious to hear more of your thoughts on this particular election. Welcome back to Senior Beat. We're so pleased to have Dennis Dresang with us today to really help us sort out all of the particulars of this last election. Tom, and you were just talking about the Bush presidency and some of the things he did after the election.
Dennis had mentioned that when George W. Bush was elected and declared a landslide, I remember one of the things he tried to do was privatize Social Security, and that really fell flat. I mean, his mandate didn't last very long there. I now see a similarity with Medicare. You know, even though President-elect Trump said he was not going to touch Medicare, there are people in Congress who do want to touch it, who want to privatize it, basically. And I'm, you know, as an advocate for older people, I'm very concerned about that, you know, now and in the future. Pick up on that theme a little bit and see if you see something similar.
Sure. I think one observation that I would make is that there's a lot of uncertainty right now. It's been quite clear that President-elect Trump said things in the campaign that he doesn't seem to intend to follow through on. That raises the question of, well, how does he feel about Medicare? How does he feel about Social Security, immigration, all sorts of issues?
We were pretty low on any kind of policy directives during the campaign.
It was a very negative campaign,
Yep.
and he was more eager to say that he was running against crooked Hillary than saying what he was running for. And so that leaves a lot of questions. Now, if we're looking for signs, then we look to, for example, the cabinet appointments. And the cabinet appointments include a lot of people who are from the business sector, a lot of people who have been very outspoken to privatize health care generally, housing policy, education policy, and policy like Medicare and taking Medicaid and really making it less of the partnership between the federal government and the states and more of a state kind of program. And I think that that is a critical thing to note, because unlike what you were referring to with George W. Bush, where he had some ideas that kind of, when it got to Congress, went over like a pregnant pole vaulter. The situation right now is we have leaders in Congress, most notably Paul Ryan from Wisconsin, who's Speaker of the House, who is also very eager to privatize and have vouchers rather than programs that have traditionally been ones where if you are eligible, then you get the benefits that you have, in a sense, helped to pay for through your lifetime by earnings that get taxed for Social Security and the like. So I think there's more of a concern now that I would have about, indeed, privatization in a number of areas, including Medicare. I think that's a real possibility.
Yeah. Well, as you say, Speaker Ryan has, for now at least since 2011, maybe 2010, has had a plan to premium support plan for Medicare, which some people call vouchers, you know, where people are given an amount of money and they purchase a plan on the open market, you know, competitive, you know, that's supposed to hold down costs. And then, as you said, his nomination for Secretary of Health and Human Services, a guy named Tom Price from Georgia, who's a doctor, medical doctor, who is really a repeal and replace Obamacare. But one of my concerns is everybody knows we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare, I think, because that was talked about.
Yeah,
Sure.
that was,
You know, ad nauseum.
Right.
But
Without specifics.
Yes.
but-
without
Right.
specifics, but people may not know that Ryan's plan includes Medicare and Medicaid, and not just the repeal of Obamacare. So you know, I think the question is Trump going to stand by his promise that he wasn't going to touch Medicare? Or is he going to, because of what you said earlier, lack of interest basically in those kind of issues, going to defer to Ryan and Price and
Let it happen.
let them go.
Yeah.
And of course, then you get into the dynamics of Congress,
Right.
because as you say, the Senate actually, Democrats picked up a couple of seats, so they may not be so eager. Because I think, I just read emails and stuff, and I see where senators don't seem nearly as eager to take on Medicare.
Right.
At least right off the bat. Because they think that could wipe out some of their gains. Right, like in the next, midterms.
And how strong is the Republican Party behind Trump? I mean, there's a lot of division in that end of it as well.
That's an excellent question, and I think it's fair to say that there is Donald Trump, and then there's the Republican Party,
Yes,
and there's some
yes.
overlap, but it's not as if they have felt that he is their candidate.
That's right.
and that he's been a loyal part of the party and the like.
And we haven't seen him making many overtures to Congress at this point, at any rate.
That's right. Now, and there are some indications vis-a-vis the Senate that indeed he's doing some in-your-face kinds of appointments, knowing that there is opposition among the Republican senators to some of his appointments. That may not play out very well in the future. The other thing about the Republican Party, and this is specifically to the House, is that is a divided party, a divided caucus, and the so-called Freedom Caucus, which is very libertarian, would be very supportive of the privatization kinds of schemes in their various forms, is only part of the Republican Party. It's a part that Paul Ryan can count on for some purposes, but not for all. And so his leadership is going to be somewhat challenged. He's not their candidate within the caucus, yet there will be some policies that they will indeed support.
But we also have to admit that all of this is speculation. We started out, I think, talking a little bit about the uncertainty of what we're facing, and in one of the things that Tom and I try to do on this program is to make sure that people understand they have to be watching issues and asking questions and taking an active role in what's happening with our government. And
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, and I think that there are a lot of people who, in Wisconsin as well as elsewhere, who are very depressed, and in part it's because they're shocked. They didn't
Yes.
see this coming.
yes,
But they're also depressed because they see a lot of things that are of real concern. Concerns about policies, concerns about the fact checking and the
well, in character, you mentioned
and
earlier,
character. Role models.
international
Right.
relations.
And one way of acting when you're depressed is to withdraw.
Good point.
Another way of acting is to be sure that that you are active and you mobilize and you fight for the kinds of values and the kinds of policies that you really believe in and you think are good for yourself and for the country as a whole.
Yes, and for others.
Well, in the little time we have left, we haven't talked much about the state. What happened in Wisconsin on the election? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I think that there are a lot of policy areas now, where the state and the probable direction of the federal government, given some of the appointments, are going to be going hand in hand or parallel. One of those is in the whole privatization field, like we were talking before, in health and social services and in education. Another area is the environment, where the Walker administration has not been very supportive of environmental or conservation issues. The appointments made by Trump would indeed be very compatible with that kind of direction. Another area, however, which is a curious one, is transportation and infrastructure, whereas the Walker administration has not been supportive of making sure that there's funding for transportation and infrastructure. Donald Trump seems to be very eager to, if he has to, borrow money to have major investments in infrastructure. He may walk back on that one a bit because that is seen primarily as not only because it's needed, but as an economic stimulus. And as he takes office, the economy is actually doing really well, measured by stock market, unemployment, et cetera. And it may be that having major investments in infrastructure right now is really going to have some bad effects for the economy, so he may back off of that. We'll have to see. But that is an area, at least as we speak today, where Wisconsin's going in one direction, the federal government's going to go in another.
But, I mean, he really did make that kind of a centerpiece of what he wanted to do. I mean, given the fact that he didn't tell us all that much about what he wanted to do, that was an area where he said, I'm going to, I mean, wasn't he throwing around $1 trillion or something like that to invest in infrastructure? And of course, at the state level, you know, that's going to be a huge issue in the state budget because despite the fact that Republicans are in a majority and have the governorship, there's a real disagreement about, I mean, as you say, the governor wants to borrow a little bit and put things off, whereas at least on the assembly side, I think there's some interest in doing more, you know, maybe, God forbid, raising some taxes to fix our roads.
Sure. Yeah, and you know, one of the themes in the election has been the rural areas and the small towns, and they're feeling like they've been neglected. Well, there are two areas where they can very specifically point to where they need more help, and one is infrastructure, and the other is education. And that, I think, is going to be one where, when we think about what the state is doing and what the federal government is doing on education, they're probably going in the same direction, relying on privatization and vouchers and things like that. On infrastructure, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
I think, too, that one of the things that is unsettling is the uncertainty. And that goes along with that feeling of shock and disbelief. And then there's nothing to hold on to that you know for sure is going to be happening. So I think we're all kind of waiting for the next thing.
Yes, yeah, waiting nervously.
One wag suggested that we would be soon talking about President Pence. And I thought that was an interesting comment in the sense that Trump wouldn't last long if he keeps in, and we were talking about character, and that's an issue for me, I think, too.
Well, maybe this is just purely speculation, but I've heard more than one time is he may very well get bored, you know, with being president, because he's
He
a
has
deal.
so many deals
He
to
only
make.
sleeps 3 hours. Well, that's right. He only sleeps 3 hours a night because he's making deals.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you, it is a deal that we have a country that where the good news is we get to choose, and the bad news sometimes is we get to choose.
That's right.
So thank you for being with us, Dennis.
Pleasure.
You always bring a very healthy and good attitude to your intellect and your good comments. Thank you for being here. Join us again next time on Senior Beat.